I obviously applied for the whole refugee program last year, like everyone else. I was just over the first 100 applications that got in. And then you just, go through the process. And I soon realized that there's a lot of discrimination going on within the program against the more conservative Christian, I would say the pro-Trump crowd. And then you kind of lag behind. And when I realized that, ANC member in parliament is already in America as a refugee.
My guest is SJ Duvenage, a provincial council member of the Freedom Front Plus in the Western Cape, who has attracted national and international attention after applying for resettlement in the United States under President Donald Trump's refugee program for Afrikaners. His application comes amid a heated debate in South Africa over claims that Afrikaners face persecution in South Africa, claims rejected by the South African government and viewed very differently within the Afrikaner community itself. Today we will discuss what led SJ to make this decision, the experiences that shaped his worldview, and his views on the future of Afrikaners in South Africa and beyond. And with that, welcome to the program, SJ.
Johan, thank you so much. What an honor to spend some time with you around the Afrikaner and the struggle that we are in. Thank you so much.
No, well, I'm really pleased to meet you. We've met before, but very briefly, you helped to set up, I think, an interview with Dr. Corneille Mulder for me, if I'm correct, during one of his visits to the White Crosses.
You're correct, Joel. It was last year, October, when Dr. Corneille Mulder was he gave the speech on the yearly function at the White Cross Memorial in close to Polokwane.
I remember you were kind enough to set it up for me. So with that, what is your role or your place within the Freedom Front Plus?
I think my relationship with the Freedom Front Plus started in 2021 while I was really involved in the independence movement for the Western Cape. So Dr. came to me and we had a long discussion about it. So my vision for in the Freedom Front in the Western Cape is still supporting Cape independence. So I according to that, I was voted in as in the structures of the party itself. So I'm on the executive council of the Freedom Front Plus in the Western Cape.
The story broke. I read it here in the Netherlands. Quite a storm. Tell me about that.
I think that I was just as surprised as you are. I obviously applied for the whole refugee program last year, like everyone else. I was just over the first 100 applications that got in. And then you just, go through the process. And I soon realized that there's a lot of discrimination going on within the program against the more conservative Christian, I would say the pro-Trump crowd. And then you kind of lag behind. And when I realized that, ANC member in parliament is already in America as a refugee, I started, voicing my frustration with the program itself. So obviously came to the ears of the BBC. So somebody from the BBC gave me a call, and I expressed my views on what I see, the problems within the refugee program, etc. And a few days later, they asked if they can come and make a program about it, because I'm in the system. So I said it's fine. So after 4 hours, we will see what that goes, how that goes with the BBC, and the refugee. People that's involved in the refugee program is very much organized within WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups. And so it went like storm, that I had an interview, and then I got a call from Reuters, and this is where everything, around was becoming a problem. And Reuters actually saw my Facebook page that I was involved in the Freedom Front Plus. And then they made this whole political thing about it, which was weird for me. Yeah, but that's where we are now.
Yeah, but it comes as a bit of a surprise to me. I did read some of the articles, but I didn't get this aspect that you just mentioned now. Am I correct if I say that you just told me that you expressed dismay a kind of a feeling that the Americans were discriminating against a conservative Afrikaner and were giving some form of preferential treatment to people that were closer to the left, closer to the ANC? Is that what I'm to take out of this?
Yeah, I strongly believe that. And I think if you speak to anybody in the program, you will see it's not, first with the program, you will see it's just so the people really don't know what they're doing. And that's the Church World Service from Kenya. And later you realize it's not, there's a strategic plan behind this. I'm not allowed to say anything about the program itself, but my personal experience was, if you are a normal person, if I can say it like that, if you're not involved in any Afrikaner organization, political party, you've never been involved in any, even if you're a member of the AfriForum or Solidarity, you fly out within 6 weeks. It can be done. A lot of people's flying out within 6 weeks. But as soon as, and the interview is about 40, 45 minutes. And as soon as you have been in the army, the old South African army, your interview jumped for 2 hours. And it was weird for me because with your application, you're supposed to given a letter of acknowledgement from the government of the day. So I can't see what the issue was there. But as soon as you wrote in your application form that you've been, like myself, involved in conservative politics from student years, my interview was 7 hours.
That's incredible. I must say that you've just turned the whole story upside down for me, SJ, because I'm sort of under the impression that the criticism of the program is specifically because that's the impression out there that it would favor conservative Afrikaners. And you're saying to me, no, that's quite the opposite.
Yeah, I was I was thinking the same thing. As far as I was concerned, we were invited as Afrikaners, and it clearly stated of European, Dutch, French, German. And I thought, the essence of this whole program was all about the farm murders and Julius Malema, the farmer. So I thought being involved in farm murders, it will, I will be in front of the queue fighting for the Afrikaner struggle. And it was shocking for me. My interview was really a challenge for 6 hours without any water, any break, any whatever. With a person that really, she was, in her 20s, had no idea what is the context to the South African situation. And then I was left for 3 hours outside and called in another hour. And then I was, starting to ask questions, on the WhatsApp groups, and then I realized, everybody was just 40 minutes or so. So I think in the last year that we are really very involved within the whole refugee community. I thought you just lie low, let's just see, don't make any waves. And then all of a sudden, this ANC Parliament member, he was in Parliament at 2024. All of a sudden, he, landed in America as a Afrikaner refugee. So I thought, somebody needs to say something. It can't go on like this.
You're blowing my mind, SJ. I've not read this in the press. Maybe I'm just not well informed, and maybe I've just not researched the story well enough. But that's contrary to every single thing that people believe about Trump's favoritism of the Afrikaner. You mentioned an African National Congress member. I presume that to be then an Afrikaans member of the African National Congress. He's part of the Afrikaans community. He is already in the States. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he definitely applied after me, and he's already there. And I think what
I'm blown away. I'm blown away because I'm very surprised at this. But please go on.
I think what's important is a lot of people don't understand the whole refugee thing. It started in the 80s with the more liberal way, Americans that want to bring Africans and Muslims over to the country is not, Republicans per se. And I think President Jimmy Carter started spending a lot of money to bring them over. And then slowly but surely it grows. With the Biden administration, 125,000, mainly Somalians and Arabs, Muslims went over as refugees. And just financial way, you get paid per refugee. So when Trump saw what was going on in the program, all the money that's just wasted, and he stopped the program, a lot of people lost their jobs and they're not getting the money anymore. So just financially, they are really irritated with the Trump administration. And then all of a sudden, he make way for 7,000 Afrikaners, which they see as white privilege people of the apartheid system. Then they must help them. And the other thing that's very important is that over the last 30 years, if you are a refugee, they started making way for the refugees to get a job within the refugee program. So 90% of the people that wait for the Afrikaners at the airports when they land in America is Afghanistan Muslim people, which makes a huge challenge for specifically single moms with children. So that's what we pick up. So it's a lot of, and I strongly believe, I think the Democrats, that really hate the Republicans and Trump per se, use this program as an anti-Trump campaign against the Afrikaners.
Yeah. But okay, the American embassy is right now representing Trump's America. That's their job. The ambassador is a direct representative. He's the voice of Donald Trump in South Africa. But what you're saying to me is that your experience had been when you knocked on that door and you asked for refugeeship, you were kind of being put in the back of the line because you were identified as somebody that was part of conservative Afrikanerdom. And because of your political engagement. Is that, I mean, how did you come to that conclusion? Was it during your first meeting with the Americans?
Yeah, my experience was very professional. I had no problems with that until my first interview at consulate in Cape Town. I mean, I was sitting there and the people that was around me, they walked out of there within 30, 40 minutes. And then all of a sudden I was, there for 7 hours. Then I started thinking, what is wrong? What's my option to actually get the refugee status? And it's, I'm going for 4 months now without any response, no communication whatsoever. And then we start talking on the WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups. And then I realized, as soon as you have been in the army, you go back and you just don't get refugee status. So that's why I in a certain sense, when I listened to Colonel Chris Wyatt, he said, if you've been in the army, it was the apartheid army. So I thought, let's just chill about it. But when I realized that at the beginning of this year, ANC Member of Parliament, received refugee status, I thought, someone needs to stand up and just, I mean, it's a President Trump administration that gave us this opportunity. But from grassroots level up, to the White House, it's Democrats that's absolutely in control of the refugee program.
Just in practical, tangible terms, what happened? You sat down for a meeting, you noticed that people are in and out. I think you said 40 minutes they're in and out, and I suppose then there's a second meeting or a third meeting set up with these folks. But you got the impression that you sat there for a very, very long time. When they, in their discussion with you, kind of figured out, oh, this is a guy who was politically engaged and also perhaps engage in conservative circles. Did you notice that they started picking up on that, and did they start asking more and more questions about that?
So I think my idea, and I got a lot of information from Colonel Chris White, if it wasn't for him, we had no idea what was going on. So every one of us is listening to all these videos to find out, what's going on. So he said to us, as soon as you arrived at your interview, they already know everything. So, give all the information that you have. And like, my boss is a lot of conservative political situations I've been into. And I wrote everything down. The fact that I was in America as guest of the Young Republicans and the Freedom Alliance and the Afrikaner Volksfront, as well as the national youth leader for the Conservative Party. And they were very worried about that. And from there on, my involvement in Formative was a problem. What my role that I played, cynical. So all of a sudden, my frustration was that I thought you will have somebody, interviewing you that really have context to what was going on. But it was really very nice, but young lady that had no idea. And every time I want to say, can I just give you context to, your question? And she would say, sorry, just a yes or a no. So it was really frustrating for me. But I thought, it's just, I used to be involved in politics, so I know it's a process. But I think I wrote a letter to the ambassador in Pretoria, asking him to look into the fact that I think there's discrimination against the conservative people in the refugee program.
Have you received a letter back or a note back or anything back from this letter that you wrote to the ambassador?
No, not at all. Not yet.
Yeah. And have you been for some of those follow-up meetings? I mean, you sat there, you said, what, in 7 hours, them kind of, I want to use the word grilling you. I imagine that's not unfair to say that. Had there been follow-up meetings or any action contacts with them past the meeting, post the meeting?
Normally, if you go to your first interview with the Americans, as we call that, that's, like I said, it's about under an hour or so. If you've been in the army, it will be 2 hours. And then on your way home, you will receive your email and stating that you are a refugee. And then when I start contacting people, why are we not, registered as refugees? What's going on? It's 1 month, 2 months. We're going for 4 months now. And then I realize it's people that have been involved, some, and it's an interview, it's very difficult to say because people, you're not supposed to share that information. But here and there, people will say, they ask me, have I been a member of AfriForum? And the person will say no. And they said, but can you prove it? So now for me, it's what is the issue of being a member of AfriForum or being the national youth leader of the Conservative Party 31 years ago? We are applying for refugees, and I can't see the context to that.
Yeah. You just said people say in these discussion groups that they ask me whether I can prove that I'm not a member of AfriForum. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. No, that's hearsay. That's people that make contact with me and support my view and say they were kind of shocked, what's AfriForum got to do with this. So it could be only the whole strategic way of the interview. I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, I thought, standing up for the Afrikaner community my whole life, fighting for conservative values, Christian. I've never been involved in any violence whatsoever. For me, I felt like, I'm discriminating against to be an interview for 7 hours and then for 4 months, nothing is happening. And they're flying an ANC Member of Parliament over. I don't understand it.
Am I right if I say that I imagine that when you went in there for the first time, you might have thought, I'm just making this up in my own head, I can imagine might have thought, well, it's positive that I was involved with the Brendan story. It's positive that I'm involved with the White Crosses, that all of these things would sketch an image of me, of somebody that it makes me more deserving. You've been more engaged in these activities. That would be a plus factor, but it turned out in your understanding of it as something that counts against you. Can you spell that out to me in very clear terms?
Yeah, I think you summed it very correctly. For me, it was this whole program of the refugees is based on the brutal way the farmers is murdered in South Africa, and specifically Afrikaners, and the shouting of "Kill a bull, kill a farmer." And I thought that my involvement with farm murders, and specifically Brenna Warner, the fact that I've visited America a few years ago, talking about the conservative lifestyle in South Africa and the challenges that we have, I thought, I'm a easy refugee supposed to be. So I was really shocked and really disappointed in the way I've been treated. But a lot of other people, this whole program doesn't really make sense. And that's the whole point of this whole thing. Personally, I think they try to make of this to send the message to the Afrikaner that this program is really tough, so don't even apply. And that's the best way to keep the Afrikaners, from the refugee program. The message that I got through my political contacts was when they asked the ambassador the question of how long is this refugee program going to last, so that we can know what we're working with. And the ambassador said, as long as there's Afrikaner refugees, there will be a program. And I think that people know that in the program. So they really try to make as tough as possible for us, so that we can turn around and say it's not worthwhile. And Johannes, I can sit here and tell you thousands of things that you won't believe of a first world country, the way they treat this whole program. People, they tell you that you're not supposed to tell anybody that you're a refugee, and that's why I'm not this big thing, because you actually will be a refugee as soon as you get your plane tickets. And so everybody goes on, we've got jobs, we've got cars, we've got life here. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you will get an email say, listen, you got cultural orientation, and on, say, for Tuesday, on Thursday, cultural orientation, and after that, you get your plane tickets, and you need to fly out on Tuesday. So you actually have 4 days to sort your whole life out and greet your mom and dad and friends and brothers, and then you leave. And that's the first time you find out where you're going, to which state, to which city. So it's really, and the people get their tickets, they will see, this ticket was booked on their name 3 weeks ago. So it's not really, there's no reason to give us 4 days. So, and then people pitch at the airport, and then they just, they just been told, sorry, we cancel, go home, we will let you know again. So I can go on with this kind of treatment of the refugees that you won't believe. And I think it's all a strategic plan to bring the Afrikaner to a point that they would say, we're not taking part in this program. It's just not worthwhile the way they treat us. And I think they are, in a certain sense, making the most of that.
What you're saying to me, this is what I'm just taking out of what you're saying to me, and please confirm whether I'm interpreting it correct. There's a program that's been initiated by Trump. You're suggesting to me that the people on the ground that are actually executing this job to bring the Afrikaners, to bring these refugees to the USA, they are not, I would imagine, at least politically, seem to follow the guidelines as we understand them, as been said by Donald Trump. That the impression that we have is that if you are, or can prove in some way or another that you're being persecuted as an Afrikaner, you have right to get access to be part of this program. But my impression is that what you're saying to me is the people on the ground, or those folks that are supposed to actually execute this, are doing exactly the opposite of that. They're discouraging in some way Afrikaners. That's. Can you please spell that out to me in absolute clear terms again?
Yeah, you must see the whole program is managed by Church World Services, and they are based in Kenya. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of money in this whole thing. So Church World Services at this stage is having a court case against the administration of President Trump because he stopped the refugees, the Somalians and the Afghanistan people to go over. So it's not just my standpoint on this. This is the realities. And like I said to you, I don't think it's just a racial thing against us. They lost a lot of money. And they manage this whole thing from your first application form, still your flight tickets. They decided which state you go to, and the guy that actually receive you at the end of your journey is also part of Churchill Services, and they decided where you live. They help you to get a job. So they are really involved in this whole thing, and most of them being refugees from Africa, and which is actually helping us now.
Take me to that first meeting when you sat down there. Are you talking to Americans now, or are you talking to these representatives of this church organization for your intake?
This whole program is run by Churchill Services, which is based in Kenya. And the only time that you really, been involved with Americans is with your last meeting that they set up. Or it's also the Kenyans that set up the meeting, and then you go to the embassy or the consulate in Cape Town, and then you're supposed to sit with CIA people or whoever, that needs to make sure that. And I understand that, if I go as this terrorist over to America and shoot somebody, this whole thing blows up in Trump's face. So I totally agree to make sure that you don't ship terrorists over to America, black or white or Muslim or Christian, doesn't matter. But then at least see what this person is all about. And if you are a family in your 20s, early 30s and never been involved in anything, they tend to ship you over easier than us that was in the army.
When you were invited for this, I call it intake discussion with the Americans, that was at the point when you had already been approved of or not? Was this your contact then with the, let's call them then the CIA members that are now looking at your security and safety background, etc., or were those people somehow, or were they purely the people from this church organization that you mentioned now?
No, it's basically the last phase. The first interaction that you have as a refugee is with the Church World Services from Kenya. They don't see you personally. It's online. And they just go through all your paperwork. And they were incredible, not just professional. They were really kind. If you sit down and you explain your fear of persecution, they will say, I'm so sorry to hear that. So I was really impressed with the way they treat us from Kenya's side. And then they booked you some for the medical first. Some goes to the interview directly. We've done our medicals, and 3 days later, it was approved. And then 3-4 weeks later, you go for your interview with the Americans at the embassy in Pretoria or at the consulate in Cape Town. So obviously, I went to Cape Town and the consulate, and that's where I really, was shocked in the way I've experienced the interview from the Americans.
Okay, so if there is a misunderstanding from my point, or from, I would imagine, largely the public's point of view, is where there's a different message communicated to you, not at the intake. You're being met by kind people, they understand your situation, and they take you to the point where you get to the American embassy. And when you get there, what you're saying is that the people within the American embassy or the consulate or whatever the case might be, they are the people that are being critical about your conservative credentials, and they discourage people with conservative credentials from taking part in this whole process. Am I getting it right now?
Yeah, but both ways. From American side, I think it's very kind, even your face. If you've been to the army, if you've been involved in a conservative organization or politics or something. But from the Church World Services, although they are friendly with you, the fact that there's absolutely no communication, nobody knows what's going on, and they try to play a game against the Trump administration by really messing up the program for us.
Is there any way that if you look at your own career and your own background and your own political engagements of the last 20 years of your life, that did you find yourself ever on a fringe, a questionable fringe of right-wing politics?
You think which I've been, I mean, the last few days, everybody wants to make me
I'm
as
trying to view it from the point of view of the Americans now, SJ.
Yeah, I think that they make, as I'm one of the right wing. So I call a friend of mine. I said, "What is a right wing these days?" We've been branded as right wing from our life, but it's such a different narrative that we really experience in South Africa. We never, were fighting against black people in South Africa. We were fighting with the Americans against communism in the border wars. And my experience was when I visited 17 universities in America. Nelson Mandela took over. I had this amazing conversation at the Regents University when a professor, after my speech, he called me. We had dinner, and I asked him, how is it possible that you, as the Americans, I remember Thatcher and Reagan claiming that the ANC is a terrorist organization and standing with the Afrikaner government. I've got a speech of President Reagan's, explaining the necklaces, how the ANC intimidate their own people. So, what happened? But a few years later, you just hand us over to the communist agenda in Africa. And he said to me, "Don't worry. If it didn't work out, we will be there to help you guys." So for me, as Afrikaner, and really being involved in everything, from open my eyes. It was like something from heaven. If that the president that from a different country call out our name and say, I see you, and I think that was the most amazing experience in my whole life when President Trump said, there are Afrikaners in Africa, I see you. And what happened after that, the whole White House thing and the refugee program, for me was kind of just an extra. But from an Afrikaner side in South Africa, we really lost our ways in so many ways. We lost our identity, we lost who we are, and we're fighting with each other the whole time. And who we are we Boers, are we Afrikaners, are we South Africans, and all of a sudden, this moment happened when President Trump said, you Afrikaners, and we have a name. We've been acknowledged in front of the whole world. All of a sudden, the people know about us in the southern tip of Africa. And that was one of my greatest moments in my life.
What you just told me now is, and I'm summarizing it for myself to try to twist my own head around it, is there's a kind of a public perception, and if I look at the publicity around not only your application but the whole project, there's this perception created that the Americans Trump would favor conservative Afrikaners for their character, their sense of hard work and conservative values and Christian values, etc., etc. You ran up against a wall, and what you told me that would suggest that either they are suspicious of you, that they might have the suspicion that you are too right-wing, or you have identified something broader, namely that if you have conservative credentials, if you are as good, solid, Christian, conservative Afrikaner, you're kind of not wanted by the application process.
Yeah, that's absolutely my personal experience. And like I said, it's not just, I'm angry because I was interviewed for 7 hours. It's through the last 5-6 months talking to hundreds of refugee people to find out what their experience is. And I think, at the end of the day, a lot of people think it's just, a political game by President Trump bringing 7,000 over. But the reality that there's 10,000 more, I think shift the whole concept. And what I really think is people is missing is that now a lot of people throw us with mud and say, you want to be refugees, you're using this opportunity, etc. For me, is you will see what's going to happen in the next 2-3 years in this country, and I think to the end of this year, nobody will ask, why do you want to be refugees? This country will go up in flames and it will be anarchy and chaos. So then the issue will shift. And I strongly, I listened to Dr. Corneille Miller the other day saying it makes sense. It makes sense for him that President Trump want the Afrikaners there, because he can see that thousands of farm boys working on the farms in America, hardworking, loyal workers. So it makes sense to bring us over.
Let me ask you, there's been a lot of publicity around this now. The process obviously is still going on. Is this and all the publicity around that, is it helping or is it hurting? Or does it have the potential of hurting?
Yeah, I think it's in the wrong hands at this stage. The people that's making the biggest noises about it is not on our side. I don't think even they are in the side of South Africa. And being conservative my life, we were not fighting racism that most of the people think. We were fighting survival. And I spoke to you the other day when my whole life actually start realizing where we are, when I was very young in the early 70s, when the Portuguese fled from Mozambique. I was standing in front of the city hall while there's hundreds of cattle trucks stopped, and the scary picture of this woman and grandfathers and kids crying was, help from the trucks, and my parents gave them food, all the ladies in town. So I asked my grandfather, where's these people coming from? What is happening? They look so scared. Yeah. And he said to me, one day we will realize that we also live in Africa. And if this bubble bursts, and we lost control, we will be running like them. So a few years later, when I was 19 years old, the Rhodesia fell. So a lot of Rhodesia people came to our schools, and they explained to us what Formative was all about, and the way they've been treated in the Rhodesia. So I was very, very aware of what was going on. When my high school days, my folks bought farm right next to the Limpopo River, so we were border farmers, and with landmines. And those days it was ANC terrorists, MK members cross our farms to plant bombs in the city. So I was very aware that we live in Africa, and it was such a challenge for me to explain to my Afrikaner people that it's one thing to negotiate, but as soon as we lose control, we lose our commandos, we will be sitting ducks in Africa. At the end of the day, we managed to at least get 800, close to 900,000 votes for the no vote. But people thought we can work something out. And I think now, at the end of the day, everybody can see it was. I explained to a friend the other day, we've got the most liberal constitution in the world, but there's only 300,000 liberal people in this country. It was only the DP those days that could manage 300,000 votes. They are in control of the DA, but they really struggling so hard to keep control over the DA. But at the end of the day, the black people in South Africa, with all the tribalism and kings, is really not liberals. The Afrikaners is not liberals. It's just a few British people that's liberals. It was never supposed to work. This whole Rainbow Nation was an agenda that was pushed, and I understand, the frustration of the leftist people in Europe and America to see this whole Rainbow Nation of Nelson Mandela going up in flames. Must be extremely frustrating for them. And I can't understand why, even the liberals that branding themselves as they are, intelligent and they know what's going on, can turn around and say, listen, we are sorry. The whole thing didn't work out. We expected to, so we need to work something out now. I saw the research about 2-3 weeks ago of 17% in South Africa only support the whole democratic system. Close to 40% wants to go back to tribalism. And that is the future of South Africa. The kings, the chiefs, the Griquas, the Afrikaners. I strongly believe the future in South Africa will be decided by the Zulu king and the Afrikaners.
I just want to once again go back to this block now. Exactly where are you now in the process? Are you still waiting for that first contact or that first contact back? Where are you right now with your application?
Yeah, I think if you ask any person that applied for a refugee program, the biggest frustration is there's absolutely no communication whatsoever. So nobody knows what's going on. And I think if it wasn't for Colonel Chris Wyatt, nobody would ever know what's going on. So I'm supposed to be in as a refugee in America at the end of February already. And so you just don't know. I'm finished with everything, the medicals, whatever. But a lot of people that's finished with the medicals and it's 6 months later, you need to go back for your medicals. A lot of people is going back for the medicals now. It's not just me. It's my experience of what I'm seeing is that if 2,000 people applied, say, example, per month, they try to take about 800 over, and the rest is just left behind, and then they move on. So you got people that is finished with the program like I am as September last year, and then November, December, and everybody think it's our group that's left behind, but it's part of the strategic plan, I believe, and it's just my viewpoint, but that's what I get from the program.
Yeah, but right now, as you're sitting there, SJ, are you saying that you think in the back of your head, you're expressing that to me in this discussion, you'll probably do so the same thing with Chris Wyatt tomorrow, that the block that you're up against, that problem that has not been dissolved yet or solved yet, or whatever the case might be, is your suspicion yourself that the process finds you, for some reason or not, too right-wing to be accepted into this program. Is that where we are right now?
Yes, I totally agree with that, and that's my personal viewpoint with the info, my experience in the program, and a lot of other people that I've spoke to.
I'm going to ask you will you be kind enough to formulate that for me in a clip? Because I want to put that clip out.
Okay. I think in the way they ask your information on the application, they ask you about your political involvement, and they ask if you've been in the army. And those two questions, it's very easy to identify you as a person that was fighting in the old Afrikaner army in the Bush Wars. You've probably been a supporter of Donald Trump. You're anti-communist, anti-socialist. So that's the first thing they identify. And then as soon as they know that, obviously your interview is not 40 minutes. It's now 40 minutes and 2 hours. And in the questionnaire, they also ask you about your political involvement. And as soon as anything looks like Afrikaner organizations, I don't know, I've never been in a Zuidlander or anything, but I can imagine if you're from Oranje or Zuidlander or Boerelegioen or whatever, there's another 5-6 hours as interview, which is not a problem for me because, we've got nothing to hide. But at the end of the day, you don't hear anything from them after that.
Can you, in looking back at your life, identify for yourself anything that might be a stumbling block that might identify or might interpret you as too right-wing for the Americans? Have you ever in your life taken part in what goes beyond just mere activism?
Not at all. And I think what it's difficult for me to see myself as a right wing. I know I'm conservative, and I know I'm a Christian. And the narrative has always been, as soon as you voted no or you voted for the Conservative Party, you are right wing, which is so far from the truth. And I always remember one of the moments in my life, the last, I think it was early in the 90s, when over 100,000 Afrikaners had a meeting at the Formative Monument. It was the last time that we actually filled the amphitheater. Dr. Tribalism was speaking to us, and the banner said the first freedom struggle started. And he got up, and the first words that he said was that we as Afrikaners salute millions of Black people that built this country with us. And I think a lot of people miss this whole concept. We never want to enslave or dominate or anything with any tribe or group of people in South Africa. We really try to keep an environment for us to survive. It was all about survival in Africa. And a lot of people don't realize that. And when Prince Buthelezi stood up about 10 years ago in Parliament and say, listen, we are worst off under this new system, then it wasn't on apartheid. I always was involved in conservative politics, but not one day I was a racist or do anything that was close to that. For me we need to acknowledge the tribalism. We need to give the kings their land and the chiefs to rule over their people. But I need to have space where I can also rule in a Western Christian way over my own people. And this is going to happen in the next few years. We will be able to sit down around a table, and that will be the future of South Africa.
Ridiculous question to ask, but I have to ask you that. Do you think that this program of Donald Trump, that there might be something that would be called Afrikaners that are too right-wing for the program, too right-wing for Donald Trump, too right-wing for the USA?
Yeah, I think as far as the Americans are concerned, absolutely. It's sad for me because I was in the Conservative Party when a lot of things was going on, and I know a lot of people that try to fight for our freedom, and a lot of people will say we are not going to give this country to the ANC. And a lot of youngsters, I was a youngster, said, what are we going to do? We need to fight. So some of them did stuff that I was never involved in. I was always trying to bring the idea of freedom to the reality of the people, to sit down. I strongly believe we need to get our own house in order, before we can start fighting for something else. And our house is really not in order and was not for a long time. But I was never involved whatsoever. And I know Colonel White said, you always be, honest in your negotiations with the whole interaction with the Americans, which I was. And he said, it will be people from CIA and they know everything. And I think that was the biggest shock for me, that the lady was doing the interview with me was a youngster in her 20s, and she had no idea what she was supposed to do with me. And I think that's why she just rumbled for 6 hours and sent me out for 3 and called me in for another one. And actually, we didn't get anywhere. And as soon as I tried to explain to her, listen, we were not fighting a racial war. We were fighting communists with the Americans. And they just don't think that the narrative is true. So for us as conservative Afrikaners, it's going to be a challenge. It's easy to fight Australia because people have some idea. But as soon as you land in America, they still see the narrative of Nelson Mandela as this messiah of African people, and he's all about peace and justice, and it will take a while for them to see what South Africa is actually all about.
The perception of the world out there, and that's the perception that the newspapers are creating, and it's exactly in your case as well. I mean, you caught the media attention here, and what they published was a white guy who lives in a beautiful house, I think in St. Helena or somewhere in South Africa, and they sort of paint the rather cynical picture of you as being a successful, privileged, fat cat Afrikaner. That's the way in which it's presented to the public by the news industry. But what you're saying to me is that the stumbling block in your case is, as we've just said now, and I'm repeating myself, that the Americans might find you too right-wing for their own liking. That's what you think is the stumbling block.
Yeah, too conservative though. I don't see myself as a right wing. But Johan, what I think is so important is I saw couples, mom and dad with a child of 4 or 5 years that is willing. They sold their farm, so they have a lot of money. They take one suitcase 4 days in advance. They know where they are going. They land in a city that they've never seen, in a state that they don't know anything about, with no job, no car whatsoever. They must see where's the bus route first before they can start looking for a job.
Yeah.
Anybody think it's wow, it's opportunity go to live the American dream must be mad. And I'm so shocked to think that a lot of people say, oh, the media, they drive narrative, but they believe the stuff that they are saying. And for me, I just can't imagine. I salute. And if I have children like 5, 6 years old, I don't think I have the guts to do that. I have the greatest respect for the people that's willing to do that. And every time I ask them, and I made a lot of them, why do you do this? I don't have the guts to do that. And they would tell me, listen, we are really, there's no future in South Africa. We fear for our lives every day. I'm on the farm somewhere. I'm worried about my wife at home, my children at the school. We can't live like this anymore. And I think it's terrible for the media just to brand this thing as we see this as an opportunity. It is really, really tough to get life together in America.
Your current situation, am I correct if I say that you have you in the meantime sold your house, sold your possessions?
Yeah, I see. They say I sold my house. We were renting in a relationship for the last 6 years. We met at the Brenda Horner cross at Senegal. So when we lived in Gordons Bay, and I said to him, we need to go to a place where people know your name. And they said, let's go to Gansbaai. He's got friends there. So we rent place to find out if we want to, establish ourselves in Gansbaai. And then the refugee program started, and we actually moved to St. Helena now. He's closer to his mom and dad. At least we spent some time with them. And like I said, I came 2 weeks ago, came to my folks to spend some time with them.
You've told me prior to our meeting, we've talked a little bit on WhatsApp, that you have had, in fact, direct threats to your life. You mentioned somebody came at some kind of a protest action at the American embassy or something like that somebody came and tapped you on the shoulder and said, they've got your name, you're on a list.
Two things that really that I've used in my claim is the one. I was sitting in Gordons Bay, my house, and listened to this whole Brenda Horner thing. And all of a sudden, this whole fight was about the farmers now that stormed this court case. And I thought, who's doing something about the boy itself? Everything shifts to racial tension and stuff. So I thought, I'm going to drive from Cape Town, and I'm going to put up a cross for Brenda Horner, which I did. And it was challenging because everybody think, what's your agenda? I didn't know the farmer or anything. So I pitched there and I said, please show me where's the place, where's the pole that he was hanged on. And everybody would say, who are you? You're sent from who? What's your agenda? But I got involved I pitched it on Monday, the Monday before Friday, the Senegal 2, they called it. And I made a video and said, listen, I'm going to put up a cross here. And that video went out, and the farmers asked me to meet with them. And they asked me to see how, to get something going that everybody will move out the town to the Day of the Vow festival area, about 16 kilometers from Senegal, which I thought is a great idea. And then hundreds of people pitched with heavy arms and everything at the farm. And we were, ready if something went wrong in Senegal. So I made videos to other people come to the farm. And so it was really active in social media. And 2 weeks later, I went to my parents in Limpopo, and on my way there, I heard that there was one of other gathering at the American embassy from a pro-Trump man. I don't know, really was involved. So I went there, and I wasn't part of that. I know Boereli Gioen was there and marching up and down and something. So I was standing across the street right next to the fence of the embassy. And a white person about in his 50s, 60s walked up to me, slowly but surely, not greeting me or anything. So when he was about 2 meters away from me, he said to me, "Listen, Asia, you need to lie low. You are on a list. They're coming for you. They will kill you. So, delete your cell phone number and lie low for a while." And I was so shocked. I didn't do anything. I didn't even have a gun. So I was involved in the whole Senegal thing without a gun or anything. And then I left it there, and obviously everything calmed down after that. And about a year and a half later, when me and Johan negotiate with an American company, a device that you can take your cell phone on satellite. Just before I signed the deal, I had this debate with Carl Neas, which went viral as well, and it was a quite heated debate about farm murders, and I accused the EFF being involved in farm murders, and we have proof of that, and the police that was involved. And Brendan Horner, that's close to 6 years, and there's no justice for him. Even after all the tension that it got in the minister and everything that and the Malema and the whole thing, there's no justice for Brendan. And in that whole process, when we pitched to the headquarters of the American company, they said I was not allowed. I was flagged by the Biden administration, and I'm not allowed to sign the deal. So luckily, Johan was there, so he signed the deal. But that made me very aware of that America really know what's going on in this country, much more than we do or our government knows. For me, I'm nothing. Why would they flag me because I was in debate with the EFF? So I think that's one of the reasons why I know South Africa is going to be in a lot of trouble in a few months from now. Otherwise, Donald Trump would never start the whole refugee program, and he will be involved in other ways of helping the Afrikaners and the whole of South Africa.
I'm getting the impression, Esha, and I've just met you today, and I read up a little bit about you, and I went through your social media accounts and saw some films. I get the impression that you are a fighter for the cause of the Afrikaner, that you kind of in your own world a hero to a lot of people. That's the impression that I get of you. A very well-liked, well-loved boerseun, I would say, loved by your people and supporting your people, fighting for causes like the White Monument cause, fighting for Brendan, etc., etc. That seems to be at the same time. It seems to me, that's my impression with this discussion, is what seemed to count against your application.
It's tough to be an Afrikaner, specifically in these days. We are really a tough nation. But for me, it's all about moments. One of my greatest moments was when Brendan's mom walked up to me and just grabbed me in front of the cross, where it was the first time she actually visited the place where her son was killed. The most special moments for me is the few last years when I was guest speaker of the Day of the Vow on the 16th of December, to be in an environment with really special Afrikaner people. They most of them is just there to say thanks to God that we are a nation and that we are here. There's no politics or anything like that. And that's what really hurts me at this stage, that I'm branded as this politician. I'm really not a politician. My struggle always been for the Afrikaner people. And I spend a lot of time with a lot of young leaders in the Afrikaner community. And I said, don't make the mistake that I've done. I remember I would tell my dad will always ask me, why do you waste your student life by, being involved in the Conservative Party? Why do you do this? And I would always say, it's for my people. And being older, I will strongly advise people not to do it for their people, but do it because you believe what you do is right. If it works out well, good for you. If the people acknowledge what you're doing, good for you. But most of the time, it's a struggle, and you always have more enemies than friends. And at the end of the day, we've got only one life. Do whatever you can to make a difference. My difference is to look out for my people and see what small difference I can make. And for me, be involved in this whole refugee thing is just because I think, there's discrimination going on against my conservative fellow Afrikaners, and that's why I'm speaking out.
At this point, you still don't know what the situation is. You still don't know whether you will be accepted in this refugee program. Ridiculous question, but if you could get a message to the person the closest to Donald Trump, because you're not going to get your message to Donald Trump himself, but if you can get it the closest to the president, what is it that you would like to say about your experience and ultimately I would imagine your desire to go and immigrate to the USA?
Yeah, I would just say what I've wrote on the letter to the ambassador. In that is that I will start looking at the refugee program differently. There is 26,000 farm boys working on the contracts in America. And their wives and kids is all by themselves here in South Africa. And I will beg him to stop this whole program and try to get those families that want to be refugees and want to take up the refugee program to get them to safety. They are living here all by themselves. Their dads is not here. I think let's start there. And then I would say, stop the program, bringing new people in and getting all the other people that is stuck here for all the wrong reasons to America. And at the end of the day, we need to embrace the whole new lifestyle in America. But at the same time, we need to help our people in South Africa. So my plea from day one was, you will have to make a success of your life in not just in America, every Afrikaner in Australia and Europe. It's challenging, and nobody wants to leave this country. We are really forced to leave this country. So if we can unite and help each other, the people that support the wife and kids that's all by themselves here, the people that's going to stay in South Africa. And I agree with Dr. Corné Mulder that the refugee program is a solution for a very small group of Afrikaners. We can't just leave them here. We need to be ambassadors in the rest of the world. It was heartbreaking for me when that Aaron's Roots program of the White Crosses in Washington, I share that on a lot of refugee platforms, and it was deleted immediately. And I thought, I wonder if the people that's already, the 7,000 that's already there and the 10,000 that hopefully will be going to America in the next 4 or 5 months. Now, if it wasn't for thousands of farmers that was brutally murdered on their farms, they wouldn't be there. This at least what they can do to salute the Afrikaners and the Boers and the farmers that was brutally murdered is go and make a success of your life. And as soon as you're on your feet and you are successful, turn around and start helping the people in South Africa and become an ambassador for what is happening in South Africa. Then we will be a winning nation. If we can't achieve that, I strongly believe we will, as a nation, disappear in the next 10 years.
Last question, SJ, just update me now. Where are you exactly right now? What is the next thing that ought to happen, should happen, that you hope will happen?
Well, I'm hoping to get an email saying that I have a cultural orientation in the next few days, and which is online. So after that, I will get my plane tickets, and with 4 days, I will fly out. I've got no idea what my social media problems will be. Maybe I'll get an email and say, listen, we don't want to hear from you ever again. Or maybe they would say, let's just get this guy over America so that he can stop talking about this whole program. But whichever way, I'm in God's hands and he will look after me.
Well, I hope for the best for you, SJ. Thank you very much. And I have to just say this to the viewers out there. I'm so sorry if I sound totally disorientated. I planned a whole interview here based on a whole series of questions I wanted to ask SJ. He's taken it on an entirely different track for me, but I hope to get a promise from you that we'll be able to follow this up. You're going to keep us informed.
Love to. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for talking to me.